I said I was going to begin dramatically. You just, if for some outlandish reason, you have to choose between going to shul on Purim or going to shul on Rosh Hashanah, I beg you to go on Purim. Now, that sounds absurd, but I think that's a real message. I think Purim has lost its majorliness. I'm saying that as opposed to being a minor holiday. It is far from a minor holiday, and I hope that over the last 4 weeks, we had a sense of that. The lessons that we gleaned from studying Esther and Mordecai and the other characters and their actions mean a world of meaning to us. And I believe, as we'll continue to discuss today, that it is highly, highly underestimated. And I trust you'll see why I'm saying that by the end of today. It has not been a great week here. Today, I saw pictures of what's called Yisrael Hayafa, the beautiful Israel, and pictures of Yisrael Halo Yafa, the Israel that is not as beautiful. So I am sure you're aware that we now have, within this last month, 14 victims of terrorist attacks. And 2 of those attacks were Sunday and Monday. And Sunday saw 2 brothers, 21-year-old and a 19-year-old, Hallel and Yagel Yaniv, be murdered. And the following day, Elon Galenis, 27 years old, who is originally from Connecticut, but he was in Israel as a Chayal Boded several years ago, a lone soldier. His family lives in Connecticut, and he did the full 3 years, and he was planning on making Aliyah, but he had gone back to school at Columbia University in New York. He was here now just for 2 weeks for a wedding, and he was the next victim. So when I say Israel the Beautiful, though his family lives in the States, they realized that he was going to live here and that he'd want to be buried here. And so he has relatives in Renana, and that's where he was buried. His family knows no one except for the family in Renana. And so they're already flying back to Sit Shiva with their friends. But they knew he'd want to be buried there. Thousands of people attended that funeral without knowing his family, his parents, his siblings, but just to pay him honor. And all the news broadcasters use that term, while people were demonstrating once again today, and it got out of hand, the demonstrators, it was very unpleasant to watch. But juxtaposed to that, I was watching the funeral and seeing these thousands of strangers. And it was populated by people from all parts of our population. That's Yisrael Hayafa. And the Lo Yafa was watching the awful scenes from the demonstrations. But then later today, there was a graduation ceremony for young women and men who were completing their course for the Navy. And it was so inspiring, from the music to President Herzog's speech, where he is one who remains hopeful and determined that we will come through this. And there's no doubt that we will. And the sooner, the better. So I have to tell you that earlier today, as I'm watching both Israels, I was feeling very, very drained and a little nervous about being able to talk today. And then I remembered that the people that I'm talking to feel connected to this. And it's my job. I see it, a responsibility. And all of this is connected to the theme of Purim that we've been discussing, one of the themes of constantly having to be on the lookout for Hamans. Okay, with that, I'm going to begin a stream of consciousness as I share the screen. A song. Follow carefully. Shir Sameach. If our head is down and sadness surrounds us, let us be ignited from the joy within. And pay attention, please, to the words. Hey, hey, let us be filled joy, joy, as the eyes can see. Hey, hey, sing up, rise, rise up and burn by wine. Rise up and burn by wine. Hey, hey, rise up and burn like fire and flame us with power. Woe to the despair one, this night should be cheerful. Hey, hey, this night will be redeemed. Anyone who has soul within. Hey, hey, anyone in Israel who has a spark of comfort within. A spark of comfort within. Shir Sameach. Is it a cheerful song? What do you think? It's called a cheerful song.
But it's a struggle to be cheerful.
Beautiful, Beth. Okay. And what does the word fire here? It's to be equated, it's a symbol of joy, that it should be ignited. And the wine, what's the purpose of wine here? What will wine do?
To make us happy.
Well, it will rid us of the sadness. It's as if we're forcing ourselves. You know that line, what is it? Don't worry, be happy.
Yeah.
Or when we're commanded in the Tanakh, Vayita'ach sameach. How can you, and for what purpose do you say to someone or to a people, be happy, when you know perhaps at that moment that's not the emotion that one is feeling? Why do that?
I think that emotion like laughter and joy can be inspired from within. If you don't feel like laughing and you start laughing, you end up really laughing.
Yes, Esther. The song believes if you act happily, we become happy. We become, we can, and it believes that there is value in forcing ourselves to transform our emotional state. Now, I'm willing to bet that any one of us here has had that experience of saying, I've got to get myself out of this, and I have to move, and I have to push forward on different levels, in different situations.
Absolutely.
Now, anybody want to guess what the stimulus was for composing this song? It's an Israeli song that has become very, very popular way back when it was written, a little after Marlene being shoveled out of the snow. What would be a reason for such a song?
Not to be discouraged.
Yes, but I'm asking, there was something very specific.
I
An
think there was a
event.
struggle in Israel. There must have been a huge struggle, perhaps a war,
The
perhaps
73 war.
73.
73 Yom Kippur War.
Okay, so let me tell you, it was a national trauma just before Purim in 1954. This is known as the Ma'aleh Akrabim massacre.
Oh, yeah.
That's a bus that left Eilat on its way to Tel Aviv. And there was an attack carried out, as I say, just before Purim of that year, in the middle of the day. 11 passengers were shot dead. One of the passengers called to his younger sister saying, is he off the bus? He wasn't off the bus, heard the older brother and shot him. He became the 12th victim to die, but when did he die? Only 32 years later. He was paralyzed and in partial consciousness for 32 years. Naturally, the national mood was very, very low. The prime minister at the time, the second of the country, was Moshe Sharet. He happened to be at a Purim Neshef banquet party in Tel Aviv at a club. And he met the writer Yaakov Orland and composer, who were both there, Mordechai Zira. And story has it that Sharet took the two of them, brought them into the kitchen of the club and said, you're not leaving until you write and compose a song that will lift the spirits of our people. And that is the song that they wrote. And the melody makes it a very upbeat. I wasn't able to play it today, but a very upbeat melody with quite a message. A cheerful song. It was needed in 1954.
Bracha, why can't you sing it?
And it is as needed, I'm ignoring that, in 2023. These are the three young men that I mentioned. Yehi Zichram Baruch. My guess is that Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, Irving Greenberg, who I'm sure many of you know and have read, and he spoke at the shul. My guess is that he would feel that the song reflects a lesson for life on a regular basis, and particularly reflects the essence that I want to discuss today, the essence of Purim. He says the following: after the victory, no one can give assurances that such absurd changes in people and national moods will not happen again. Rather, the celebration of Purim grows out of a wise acceptance of vulnerability. The truth is that all of life is deeply vulnerable. Health, success, children can be snatched away overnight. It was incredible listening to this victim today, his parents speaking. The sweetness of life should be savored today, for that is all one really has for sure. Now, Purim, which is considered a topsy-turvy holiday, Purim affirms that the choice is not between a totally transformed reality brought about by God's Redeemer or life in a hollow, inauthentic status quo. Some people feel, how can we be happy on Purim if we know that we still have Hamans? But just as Shabbat for 25 hours gives the pure taste of the final messianic perfection to free the Jew to participate with a full heart in the partial, flawed daily reality, so the temporary victories of a Haman defeated or a Mordechai elected prime minister should not be robbed of significance by the infinite dream not yet realized. The holiday of Purim's dialectical resolution of the tension between dream and reality is to celebrate the victory while poking fun of it, to enjoy it fully while appreciating its limitations. We're talking here about Purim, but on a personal level, and Purim should be personal. We're constantly in that tension of how can we be fully happy when we know we haven't reached the ideal situation? Well, you'd never be happy. Now, the question is going to be, what is the happiness our tradition suggests and advocates for. American Israeli author Ilana Kirshen continues this line of thought. And she says, the customs of Purim, too, offer lessons in being happy. On Purim, we dress in costume so that we do not look or feel like ourselves. Sarah, are you there? Okay, I promised you an answer. Part of being happy is about forgetting who we are or tricking ourselves into thinking that we can be somebody or something else. And don't we all need that for a bit, at least? This custom reflects the awareness that it is difficult to make ourselves happy unless we can, at least in part, forget ourselves. Put that on hold. This is surely what lies behind the custom, also on Purim, of drinking alcohol. Now, it should not get to the point where you need an ambulance to come to save the guys who are getting too drunk, but it is a tradition. It is a desire to shed some of our inhibitions and our painful self-awareness. Purim reminds us that happiness is just sadness dressed in borrowed robes. We wear painted clown masks over our furrowed brows and can't help smiling as we see our friends in their own silly disguises. Costumes, masks, they reflect that topsy-turviness. It also, by the way, reminds us of Esther's bifurcation. Who was she really? She was wearing a mask. Was she her original self, Hadassah? Or was she this Esther?
Well, wasn't she a princess descended from Shaul?
I'm sorry?
Well, Esther really, according to Chazal, was descended from Shaul.
That is a tradition. But what I'm asking here is that there were times, and Mordechai had urged her to have to not reveal who she was. So that's also one of the reasons that we tend to dress up. That this is a reenactment of actions and characteristics of the Megillah.
But isn't
And
close-
mostly getting dressed up, drinking, having fun, making noise is a way of dealing with life's trying moments. And there are many. And that's why what Irving Greenberg and Ilana Kirshen are suggesting is that the message of the Megillah and the mitzvot that we will talk about are guidance for living with the Jewish problem and personal problems. It's a way of dealing with life's ambiguities, which are eternal. And humor, we all know that, can be the only key to sanity.
Mhm.
I have to share with you, I had to be last week at Hadassah Hospital. Everything's okay, but I had to have something checked. And when I got there, I guess I was a little nervous. And when I entered the building, so there's an area with stores, and the first store I saw was a stationery store. And for weeks now, stores have had costumes ready to be bought. And so I found myself, because I had a little time before the appointment, buying a cowboy hat. I bought it and I wore it throughout the hospital going to the appointment. And the more I think about it, that's a perfect example. I was doing something to help me with my nervousness. And if ever there's a holiday that suggests that we have reason for nervousness, it is Purim. Interestingly, it's been suggested that Purim may well be the most depressing holiday of the Jewish calendar. Now, that's somewhat strange, because if I would have asked you, I said depressing, not serious. I would have originally said Tisha B'Av, destruction of our temples. But I think what it's suggesting, there was something definitely being destroyed on Tisha B'Av. And maybe that's easier to deal with than the precariousness of the situation that we're in such Purim-like situations with Haman's.
It makes sense to me, because when you think of the man and you think of the reversal of something horrible that could have happened. So we are happy about the reversal, but we are also aware that it can happen again.
And that's what makes it very complicated, but it's also cause for savoring that moment. Now, we look at the mitzvot of Purim. And to begin with, I want to mention this coming Shabbat. This coming Shabbat is called Shabbat
Purim.
Zachor. Zachor.
Yeah.
And what we focus on in reading the Torah is remembering the ancestors of Haman, the Amalekites, who was considered our worst enemy. Because unprovoked, and they surprised us, and they victimized the most vulnerable at the end of the line through the desert, the seniors and the babies. So we read this before Purim, a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah that has made many modern Jews uncomfortable. There's a natural desire to forget pain. So why do we read it year after year? We've decided we don't want to dwell on it all the time, as we've just said, but there's reason to remember. Do you remember in 1985, Ronald Reagan, the president, initially declined to visit Dachau concentration camp?
Mhm.
And do you know what his press secretary gave as the reason? Anybody remember? It was said, well, the president is an up person. He's not alone in that, but how unrealistic. Then, after Shabbat Zachor, we have, before Purim, what comes in between?
Titzaveh.
No, I'm talking about
The fast.
the fast, Ta'anit Esther. You'll remember in the Megillah, Esther tells Mordecai to have the Jews pray and fast. And again, I think we have considered Ta'anit Esther a minor fast, but the events of the week make me feel, and not just this week, that it is a major fast. And I'll tell you, in the class, we have now 2 Esthers. We have Esther, and then the last few weeks, Esther Petrov. Esther, are you here, Petrov? I think I heard your voice earlier. I'm only mentioning you, Esther, because there is.
Sorry, Bracha, I'm here. I just went to get a coffee.
Okay, well, the world is so funny. You know, I go to the same shul as your daughter and son-in-law, Adina and Eric. And this Sunday night in their home, there is going to be a special gathering for Ta'anit Esther, which doesn't usually happen. But it was announced, and I'm paraphrasing, that because of everything that's going on, there is a need. The one thing in our shul that we can all do and that we do share is praying, even if we have different views on different things. So there's a call for all of us to join them in their home Sunday. So I would give some thought, more thought to this fast this year. And then there are the 4 mitzvot actually on Purim. And I believe that they provide a picture of our traditions, understanding of what simcha, joy, really is. Now, what I want to do is frame the discussion of these 4 mitzvot, reading the Megillah, the Su'udat Purim, and Mishloach Manot, and Matanot Levyonim, gifts to the poor, and sharing food with friends. I want to frame this discussion by mentioning a Dr. Martin Seligman. Anybody know who he is? He's the father of positive psychology. What is positive psychology? Very succinctly, it's a focus on human strengths and potential rather than all of our neuroses and pathologies. Now, according to Seligman, there are 3 types of happiness. Positive psychology takes you through, read this very, very carefully. Positive psychology takes you through the countryside of pleasure and gratification, up into the high country of strength and virtue, and finally to the peaks of lasting fulfillment, meaning, and purpose. So what are the 3 types of happiness? Number 1, what does he mention?
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Okay, and pleasure, the pleasant life, is an appreciation of basic pleasures, bodily needs. What is the 2nd type of happiness?
Gratification.
The strength
That
and
goes
virtue.
with pleasure. Pleasure and
Gratification.
gratification go together.
The strength and virtue.
strength and virtue, discovering an individual discovering his or her own strengths and virtues to enhance his or her own life. And what is the third type of happiness?
To find the fulfillment of the meaning of life.
And purpose. Now, what does he mean by that? Using the individual using his virtues and strengths that he got in the good life and using those strengths to contribute to the happiness of fellow human beings. In other words, employing those strengths for a purpose greater than me.
I would
Now-
add, Bracha, wouldn't you add awareness of the good things that you have?
Well, that's part of good life.
Yeah, but some people are not aware of how lucky they are.
That's very true. That's very true. And that's, they don't get to that stage. Now, so we've said what the three are. Reading that
Bracha?
again to yourself, how
Okay.
does Seligman feel about the three types?
Rabbi, it's
Did you
strange
say
that he,
3 or 4?
I'm sorry,
Did you say 3 or 4?
three. There's pleasure and
Oh.
gratification, a pleasant life. There's the good life.
I was thinking of love, not just love, the feeling of that when you love somebody or something, love makes you happy. If you can open yourself to love, as long as you can find something to love.
Okay, he would certainly feel that that's, I think, part of your strength and virtue. And it sounds like you're saying that the love goes beyond yourself. But these are
Yes.
the three types that Seligman talks about. So I'm asking now, how does he feel? If you read that short paragraph there, how does he feel about the three types? Pay attention closely to the wording.
It's like a hierarchy. You're starting at a level, but you're getting higher and higher and higher until the peak is this idea of doing something with your life that gives you meaning and purpose. That's the
Great.
true,
Yeah.
real happiness.
Yes, Michael.
I
Each
also,
of them is a positive emotion, but we see a progression.
but he makes a point of talking about lasting fulfillment, that it's not just temporary.
Well, I believe that that last stage, he feels you're building up toward that. And I believe he would say that a person should have all three.
Yeah.
But you raise yourself going from one and hold on to that, but go beyond and hold on to both. And then go beyond till you reach that peak that Michael just said.
I have something to add, if I may.
Yes. Speak loudly, please.
I was just gonna, so I love everything you've said. So I just wanted to say, I think it's the idea of appreciation, what he's saying. We've been, all of us have done, I've seen such kindness through this virus time. And I would always hope the world would be a better place for it. And when I see Purim, so we were saved. So we have to be grateful. We have to appreciate the blessings in our lives. These are some of our positive points, our strengths. And these are the things that we have to acknowledge God. God really has done so much with virtual and so many blessings in our lives. So we have to acknowledge all these things. And then the idea I hear of everlasting, that these mitzvot, the Torah, is not something temporary. Even though we've gone through this, we made it through and we were saved this time, we've got to follow the Torah. We've got to do mitzvot. We've got to be the best we can be for the world. And God hopefully will be very happy with us and will be good to our people. So that's just what I think. Thank you.
Thank
But-
you.
By the way, Bracha, you were talking before about clothing. And when you're dressed well, you feel well. And that's why, like Shabbat, you dress well for Shabbat and for Chagim. And it's kind of odd or interesting that this parasha connects to, is always read just before Purim. And clothing is a big part of the parasha.
Yeah,
Bracha, from the
Marlene.
point of view of psychology, going right back to Dr. Seligman, he's starting off with the very personal psychology, like pleasure and gratification can
Yes.
be felt like an infant by an infant. And then it's a journey, and even his use of the words countryside and high country and peaks shows this journey in which we're always trying to go uphill and struggling to get to the point where what we feel personally we build upon, and then we are able to use it for the benefit of others.
Beautifully said.
Bracha, does Seligman mention Viktor Frankl at all? Man's Search for Meaning. I saw a very interesting YouTube just recently, because when I look at this Seligman line, it's starting off with the happiness, etc. And this YouTube was very interesting. It was about Schneerson, the Rebbe, and Viktor Frankl apparently was teaching at a university, I guess it was in Germany or Austria, I don't know exactly where, and he became very, very discouraged. He was mocked about his attitude about things, and he wanted to go to Australia. He had just lost all hope. This is after the war, of course, and Schneerson sent a message to him to stay the course. And he attributed he got hope again. And so when I look at this thing about happiness and everything leading to purpose, meaning and purpose, he had his meaning and purpose, but he lost it. He lost his happiness, and he had to have that hope again to go. It was like a circle, a vicious circle. But he did eventually, he wrote his book, but he was encouraged by the Rebbe to do this, which I found quite interesting.
Very interesting. I can't say that Seligman refers to Frankl, but I understand why you would think of that, certainly. Okay. So I'd like us to find parallels in chapter 9 of Megillat Esther with the words of Dr. Seligman. So let's see if you can note them. And the remainder of Jews who were in the provinces of the king gathered for war and stood up for their lives and rested from their enemies on the 14th of Adar, and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. And the Jews who were in Shushan gathered for war on the 13th and 14th of Adar, and rested on the 15th, and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. For this reason, the unwalled Jews who live in the unwalled cities make the 14th day of the month of Adar rejoicing and feasting, and a Yom Tov, and mishloach manot from a man to his fellow. Mordechai wrote these things and sent letters to all the Jewish people that were in the provinces of King Achashverosh, near and far, to establish for them to make the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day each and every year as the days that the Jewish people had respite from their enemies, and the month that was reversed for them from misery to joy, miagon l'simcha, and from mourning to festival, to make them days of feasting and joy, and sending portions from man to his fellow, and gifts to the destitute, matanot le'evyonim. The Jews enacted and accepted the laws upon themselves and upon their progeny and upon all who join them, that they should not fail to be performing these 2 days as they were written and according to their time every year. And these days are remembered and done in every generation, every family, every state, and every city. And my fear is not enough of us do all of this. Now, anybody see the parallels? Some details in here that parallel Seligman's progression. Come on, look.
He started with a very simple feasting
Yes.
and for yourself. It's all for yourself.
Uh-huh.
Then you progress up to giving gifts to friends, which was like his second progression. And the final one, the fulfillment, meaning and purpose in life, that's where you have to help other people. It's not just friends, but strangers that actually need help.
Yefeh. By the way, why, aside from the fact that it's written that way in the Megillah, why are you meant to give at least 2 food products to your friend? Why not just one?
The only thing I heard a long time ago, because I asked that question once, was that it forces you to say 2 different brachot. I don't know if that's anything at all. Like you can't just say one bracha when you're having the food, but there have to be 2, like a fruit and a pastry or something.
I think
I'm sure some people think of that. What's a different reason? I don't know where you were then. Not at Beth Tikvah, huh?
Bracha, I think
Yes.
we celebrate, a symbol of celebration is always connected to food. You make Seudat Shabbat, and even on Purim, you make sure, like this is Shabbat, that you're going to have Seudat Purim in the afternoon so that you can have Seudat Shabbat after. So we always associate food with joy.
Okay, I was just asking though, just a small point that it's saying that you don't want to just fulfill the mitzvah of giving a piece of food to someone, but you want them to have variety, not for the sake of a bracha necessarily, but just as a nice gesture. You're being more considerate. And of course, it's meant to be something that's ready to be eaten. You're not helping a friend, being nice to a friend by giving them something they have to cook or bake.
I just thought of another one, Bracha.
Yes.
You give 2 pieces of food to a person, it allows them to keep one and to play it forward. So that they can.
Very nice.
Yeah, but
Okay, so anybody who gives to the Bernsteins, you'll know that they're only keeping one.
But Bracha, my memory from childhood, that Mishloach Manot was always sweets. It was baked stuff and chocolate and things like that. I don't remember like a different kind of food.
I think I've seen both sweet and salty, and sometimes people put in a drink also.
I remember there was a full plate and it was to more than 2 people, but my mother started baking weeks in advance.
Yes. Those are fine, good memories, good memories. Okay, so we see this progression. All these mitzvot, the 4 of them, reading the Megillah, and we are supposed to read the Megillah in shul, and the more people, the better. You want to make it known. The Seudah you have with other people, giving to friends and giving to poor people. What do those all share in common? They all involve what? All 4 of them.
Community.
Community, other people, whether you're close or you're not close, but there's a sense of being with others is very, very important. And the Chatam Sofer, the 18th century rabbi, says the following, and it's a response to what Haman says when he first approaches King Ahasuerus. And its relevance is still here. The purpose of Mishloach Manot, sharing the food, is to increase peace and friendship. The opposite of the habit of the enemy Haman, who said the Jewish people are scattered and separated, meaning that instead of being one nation, they are scattered and separated in disagreements. That is the perception that Haman said, and he repeated to Ahasuerus. So to make it clear that despite arguments and despite the fact that we might be in different locations, Mordecai and Esther wanted it to be known that we are each going to come together to give the Mishloach Manot. And I am sure that this year that there will be people, as I'm hearing, friends who will maintain this custom, even if there are differences. And I don't think I have to say any more about that. Now, Mordecai and Esther laid the groundwork. You'll see what I mean. The groundwork for what? For these mitzvot. Remember that Mordecai cared deeply for Hadassah. And we don't know exactly how she got to that contest, whether he was pushing her to go or whether she was taken, as so many maidens were. But once she and the other girls were taken into the harem, their families knew that they were gone. Now that would have been very difficult for Mordecai, as we read. And he had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. And the maiden was of comely form and of comely appearance. And when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her to himself for a daughter. The background. And once she goes to the palace, what does Mordecai do? Time after time, I just bring it here once, and every day Mordecai would walk about in front of the court of the house of the women to learn of Esther's welfare and what would be done to her. And when the maidens were gathered a second time, and Mordecai was sitting in the king's gate, Esther would not tell her lineage or her nationality as Mordecai had commanded her. For Esther kept Mordecai's orders as she had when she was raised by him. So the relationship that they have is being clarified, a very caring relationship. And the fact that she remembers the commentators, his message of making sure you don't reveal your true identity, that stays with her. The commentators say that Mordecai wasn't really sure that she would remember that message if she did become the queen. And let's say he assumed, because if she became the queen, would she be able to hide her identity? But the fact that he kept coming to see how she was doing, even if he couldn't see her, reveals that the caring, it was almost as if he was saying, I hope you didn't reveal, but even if you did, I'm still here for you. So that's from Mordecai's side. Esther, what does she do? And Mordecai knew all that had transpired, and Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes. And he went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry. And Esther maidens and her chamberlains came and told her, and the queen was extremely terrified, and she sent clothing to dress Mordecai and to take off his sackcloth, but he did not accept. What mitzvah has she established here, Esther? Not with food, but with clothing.
Mhm.
When we say matanot le'evyonim, an evyon is someone who is destitute. Now, Esther at this point still doesn't know the news that Mordecai knows, but she just sees something very strange. Esther talked about clothing before. He normally doesn't look like that. And when her handmaidens tell her that he's looking like that, she is very concerned. And so, if she sees that's the case, she wants to know why, but she doesn't wait to find out why. She immediately sends through a messenger clothing. What do we see? Mordecai walking by the palace, the commentators have compared to Mishloach Manot. Because when you give those manot, it's not because your friend needs them. It's a way of saying, I care for you. Mordecai's walking constantly was a way of letting Esther, as I said before, know that he cared for her. And Esther reciprocates, seeing Mordecai as an evyon, destitute, she cares as well. So this private story between Esther and Mordecai is a story of love, trust, and faith. And then what they do with that, because they themselves understand the power, the positive power that they have in having that bond. They take that, laying the groundwork and instructing the Jews to recreate those moments of caring. The 4 mitzvot on the day of Purim are all intended to bring home to us the call for social, communal, and national responsibility. And so, as somebody said earlier, that what's written, I think Sandra, what's written in the Torah is meant to be eternal, then these are messages that we do well to really, really take upon ourselves. And so when I said at the start of our class I was, in a way, not being totally serious, but those of who came in just a moment late or later, when I said, if you have to choose for some outlandish reason between going to shul this Purim or going to shul at Rosh Hashanah, then go for Purim, because the messages are so in need of being heard. And if I said that we usually, Purim, I remember days that we made in Toronto, so many families would get together, even if it wasn't on a Sunday, and we'd have Purim spiels, and we had the Purim Suda. I'm afraid that this is not going on enough anymore, because it isn't just a simple tradition I'm claiming, but it's a tradition that's giving us something much more. I'm scared to not say the right thing. I want to say than a ritual. Those rituals are concrete calls for doing something with our society and societies. So, on that note, have you all baked your Hamantaschen? On the news today was that stores are charging and bakeries charging much too much. So the broadcaster said, well, then just bake your own, buy the flour and buy the sugar. And, well, I like, I don't like prune, not prune. What do you call it? The other, perig. What's perig?
Moon.
Anyway, I see Marilyn Cohen. How are you, Marilyn?
I'm just
Good.
fine.
You're
I'm
back in
remembering one of the songs that we sang at that Purim spiel. Shul politics, every night at meetings is how we get our kicks.
there.
It was a whole
On that
song.
note, everybody make sure you go and show support to Barbara Albert. Batzlacha.